Hello and good afternoon, y'all. Welcome to our webinar today. As we're letting folks in, I just wanted to welcome everybody to our webinar, Cuts That Still Bite, Navigating the Changeable Federal Landscape for School Meals and Farm to School, hearing voices from the field on what is happening, as well as farmer resilience. So today we are offering interpretation, and we have Alonso Barron from the Community Language Cooperative. And Alonso, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Buenas tardes a todos los participantes de esta reunión. Mi nombre es Alonso Ortiz y estoy aquí con la Cooperativa Comunitaria de Lenguaje, ofreciendo interpretación simultánea, confidencial y en primera persona para esta reunión como parte de un esfuerzo a practicar la justicia del lenguaje. De esta forma, las personas en este webinar podrán participar en el idioma de su corazón. Todos somos una parte importante de este proceso, por lo cual les recordamos intentar ser lo más claros y concisos posibles para posibilitar una mejor interpretación. En un momento se activará la interpretación y usted verá un icono de globo abajo en la pantalla que dice interpretación, o si usted se está conectando a través de un teléfono o una tableta, verá 3 puntos en la pantalla. Aquí usted podrá pulsar y activar la interpretación, escogiendo el idioma de su preferencia. Si usted no es completamente bilingüe, puede seleccionar su idioma preferido y apagar el audio original para que no escuche ambos idiomas al mismo tiempo. Muchísimas gracias. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alonso Barron Ortiz. I am here with the Community Language Cooperative, providing simultaneous, confidential, and first-person interpretation for today's meeting. As part of a collective effort to help create a space for language justice during this webinar so that participants can communicate and engage in the language of their heart. We are all an important part of this process, so just a reminder to do your best to be clear, concise, and as succinct as possible to allow for the best interpretation, considering the depth of our topic today. In a moment, interpretation will be activated, and you will see a globe at the bottom of your screen where you can select the language of your preference. Or if you're joining from a phone or a tablet, you can select the 3 dots at the bottom to activate this function. If you are not bilingual, you can select your language of choice and silence original audio so that you don't hear both languages at once. Thank you. We can activate interpretation now, Ryan.
Well, thank you all again, and thank you, Alonso. Just a heads up, we are recording today's webinar, so we'll be sharing this afterwards, as well as both the English and the Spanish version, as well as the slides and any links. If questions or anything arise for you, feel free to enter them into the chat. And if you really like someone else's questions, feel free to comment that resonates for you, or just add a +1. That kind of helps us to know which ones to try to address live while we have everybody here during the hour. And if you do have any technical difficulties, let us know in the chat too, and a member of the National Farm School Network team will help you out. Today we have myself, Ryan Betts, I'm a policy specialist in the National Farmer School Network, and we're going to be joined by a panel of really excellent speakers who are farmers or work with farmers to kind of help us digest everything that's been going on with these shifts in the federal landscape, especially as how they affect farmers. So we have Cynthia Green, Emma Johnston, Ponta Flores, and Spencer Moss, and I'll introduce them a little bit later. But real quick, we always like to just kind of really quickly touch and ground ourselves in what is farm to school and a little bit more about NFSN. So, when we say farm to school, we're talking about activities that support the connections that communities have with fresh, healthy food and local food producers, and the ways that we engage children in learning about food and ag. So, there's typically kind of 3 pillars: education, procurement of local foods into schools, and then school gardens. And all of these are mutually reinforcing activities. You don't need to have all three, but there's no real, quote unquote program of farm to school, but they typically contain these elements. And so why? It's because, through farm to school, kids win and farmers win and community wins. This is a really great, movement that uniquely sits at the intersection of all of these different sectors and has so many different, cross-pollinating benefits that include, public health, the economy, and more. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But it really is a triple win, and it directly connects with the policies that we're talking about today and how we talk about the policies. So as I said, farm to school is a strategy for revitalizing community and regional food systems, and it provides a range of positive impacts. Research has found that farm to school benefits public health, education, equity, community development, and an environment. And it really helps to strengthen the connections within a food economy, and it provides increased economic activities in local areas and in states. And through local values-based procurement, we see an increase in the number of school and producer relationships. And I think a lot of our panelists will be able to kind of speak to that today. This in turn, just generates positive relationships, not only among the farmers, but like the farmers with the schools, farmers with the kids, farmers with families and other community members. And this is an investment. Farm to school has been shown to create jobs, and for each dollar invested, it stimulates an additional 60 cents to $2 of local economic activity. And really, it's helping to transform school lunch. These are some beautiful, real school lunches that incorporate local foods. And according to the most recent Farm to School census, we have seen $1.8 billion spent on local foods across 74,000 schools, which has impacted 45.6 million students. So a little bit about the National Farm to School Network. We have a vision of a strong and just food system for all, where we're seeking this deep transformation towards that system, and we're doing that through farm to school and early care and education. And as a leader of the National Farm to School movement, we advocate for policy. We advocate for systems changes and environmental change, and we help to facilitate network and movement building opportunities and offer professional development and resources for stakeholders. And we are a fast growing network. We've added literally hundreds of new partners over the past year. We are up to over 500 partners. We have 20,000 plus network members across the country. We have an excellent advisory board and a small and mighty national staff across America. And, it's really embedded in our values that we feel that schools are the best places to start thinking about how we all live together in communities. Farm to school meals and the different activities provide opportunities for all of us to understand how the food on our plates affect us. So from the well-being that good nutrition gives our kids to the broader worlds of local economies, chronic disease prevention, environmental impacts, and more. And it's even better that when our kids learn about the hardworking farmers, fishers, ranchers that feed us, schools really become places that help us to connect. They help us to connect as parents, students, teachers, and neighbors to the land and each other. So if we really want to help create a better, healthier food system, we must value and build intentional right relationships among all people in the farm to school journey in ways that manifest 100% of communities holding power in a racially just food system. So if you weren't able to attend the first Cuts That Bite webinar that we had back in March, I wanted to do just like a little bit of a recap. And I grounded it in the flourishing farm to school movement that has been growing for 30 plus years now. So in the 1990s is when we saw kind of contemporary farm to school programs start. Farm to school and school gardens and local procurement isn't anything new. It's a centuries old idea. But in the contemporary kind of context, the 1990s is when a lot of this really started to be seeded. And then in 2007, the National Farm to School Network emerged from all of these different programs and states that were really kind of taking the lead. And the National Farm to School Network was really integral in the rest of the story that has taken shape since then. We saw in 2010 that the USDA Farm Patrick Leahy Farm to School grants were created, and alongside a companion plant, which is the community eligibility provision, which helps to increase free school meals for all for schools that have a certain amount of students that might be on SNAP, Medicaid, et cetera, other kind of means tested programs. So they're really great companion plans because when you have free school meals, that means you have the food service folks have more time to be innovative in areas like farm to school, local procurement, et cetera. Then in the 2010s, we kind of see this increased adoption of farm to school across schools, farmers testing it out, experimenting with it more states really giving it a go. And this is all like lending to a growing expertise in farm to school. So when we enter the 2020s and really we see this expansion not only to K-12 spaces, but really to early care and education, and we see increases in state policy. And then, of course, as the pandemic hit, by the time 2020, 2021 roll around, we see school meals for all at the federal level. And then after that expired, we see more states taking that on upon themselves. And we see more values aligned policies, such as like policies supporting scratch cooking, supports for food service staff, so that way they're able to engage in better, healthier, locally sourced and produced foods. And then we saw USDA really invest in local procurement in a bumper crop, a very exponential way through local food for schools. So in 2025, we actually, and I'm sure many of y'all know, we've experienced a lot of shifts with farm to school. And so I just want to kind of just really quickly just touch on what we saw. So from January to March, we experienced the different funding freezes and then thaws at USDA and so many different agencies that impacted the USDA, and then the CDC, which impacted farm to ECE. We saw the termination of the second round of local food for schools and childcare. Then we've experienced the cancellation of the fiscal year 2025 farm to school grants, and then as well as like the termination, then the reinstatement of USDA farm to school staff. And then we've even come to learn that some farm to school staff have taken the buyout offers. And so what this has kind of looked like in terms of, historical funding, we see in like 2008, we have 2018 rather, we have mandatory funds that have to be spent, and then usually Congress is able to add a little bit on top of that through discretionary appropriations. And so we see 10 million total for 2018-19. Then we start to see that actually increase, and then we see our peak in 2023 with close to, I think, let's see, close to $19 million total. So 14 million in discretionary appropriations. But then and when 2025 rolls around, we see that along with so many other programs, the farm to school grant was canceled. The awards were not distributed for 2025. And then when you look at the local food for schools program, you can see just the exponential impact of this funding, like hundreds of millions of dollars, over 200 million in the first round, and then it was set to go up to 660 million in the second round and include local child care centers. So just a huge impact. And we've actually we just created this resource to kind of capture the local food for schools and childcare round 2 losses. So if you click on the link in the chat or the QR code, it'll take you to this interactive map, and you can actually click on your state, and it'll help give you a breakdown. And along with this, we've just seen an incredible amount of news coverage. And so we'll share the link to our news coverage, which continues to come out to this day. I was looking on Google Alerts just the other day, and there was some incredible storytelling that's still capturing these enduring impacts of these decisions. And then also we heard from Congress, we were greeted at the beginning of the year that we were going to be undergoing a budget reconciliation process. And, that basically allows for changes in mandatory spending that's already on the books. I think I likened it to, a restaurant trying to decide, what is on their menu, and figuring out how they're going to make some tweaks. And some things are going to stay on the menu, some things aren't. But one of the proposed cuts was changes to the National School Lunch Program through changes through the community eligibility provision to make it to where less schools would be eligible, therefore less students would be able to receive free school meals, as well as some changes to the free and reduced income verification, as well as proposed cuts to SNAP. And then appropriations, in March, we averted a government shutdown, and we're still continuing on funds at the 2024 levels. And we'll see how things will take shape for this upcoming annual fiscal year of 2026. And then lastly, the Farm Bill is 2 years overdue, and that affects a lot of programs that farmers rely on and our partner organizations rely on to help, ensure stable funding, to ensure investment in their operations, which has an effect on the availability and access of local produce for schools. So what is happening now? Congress has begun has continued the budget reconciliation process. The House has passed their version of a bill. We really haven't seen, fortunately, we did not see the changes that were proposed to the CEP or the free and reduced price income verification. So that is a win, and that is a win that y'all should give yourselves a pat on the back for coming together, stepping up, sharing your voice. We see that as a direct result. And then we've also seen some increases in the House version for spending on specialty crops and organics. But sadly, we know that there are deep cuts in this House version of the bill to SNAP, Ed, and Medicaid. And cuts to SNAP and cuts to Medicaid are cuts to school meals. There's a direct relationship. Really, when there's these cuts, fewer children are going to be directly certified for school meals through SNAP or Medicaid. There would be an increased burden and paperwork for both families and school meal operators, because more people would be applying for free and reduced, and thus eligible students would fall through the cracks. And really, many of us were blindsided by the elimination of SNAP Ed in this bill, House version of the bill, because SNAP Ed plays such an important role in promoting farm to school and farm to ECE. It helps to facilitate purchases and consumption of more whole, fresh, and unprocessed foods, especially fruits and vegetables. It's also a flexible program to tailor to strategies locally. It also helps to support organizations that are working with kids and families at multiple life stages. From preschool to high school culinary and career technical education. And then SNAP Ed uses nutrition education and hands-on experiences to build life skills like growing and preparing healthy foods. And this funding has been historically consistent, and it's allowed states, counties, and local partners to actually plan ahead and build momentum. And that's in contrast to kind of like one-time unpredictable sources of funding. And now the Senate is considering all of this. And so we'll have to kind of see what the direction that they go in and how advocates respond. Additionally, we're in the appropriations process. And for this fiscal year, the House has released their suggestions, the House Ag Committee, and they have proposed $5 million in extra farm to school grant funds. So that's really encouraging that they're wanting to continue to put funds in there when so many other funds are not being considered. And then, of course, the Farm Bill, it's still overdue, and chances are it'll continue to be 3 years overdue. Now, in the executive, we've actually seen a lot of interesting things happen. Just last month, USDA released their Farmers First Small Family Farms policy agenda. So this is kind of like an overarching document on how they might act to support small family farms. And according to the USDA, these initial proposals are a comprehensive set of policy solutions aimed at improving the viability and longevity of smaller scale family farms or generations to come. And in Section 5 of this, they want to be able to provide small family farms with greater access to markets and infrastructure. And USDA actually prioritizes farm to school. And I quote, USDA will also prioritize local farmers and institutional and public food procurement policies, coupled with an effort to educate small farmers on the policies with an emphasis on USDA nutrition programs such as the Patrick Leahy Farm to School program. So this is encouraging. They're talking about it. It's important. It made it into their agenda. Also last month, the Make America Healthy Again Commission report came out. It was a policy outline to address chronic childhood disease, and it references the need for local food, school, and lunch. In fact, it said, like France and Japan, that America should make a push to use more local foods and school nutrition programs. Also, you can see there's a little triangle with a exclamation point because this report has also made news as it was discovered that some of the citations were not real, a fingerprint that parts of this report was generated by AI. And finally, the president has submitted his fiscal year 26 budget request, and there was, with the naming farm to school in the Farmers First document and the highlighting that local food should be put in schools by the Maha report, there was no request for additional USDA farm to school grant funds. And we didn't see anything in the president's budget that would hint at a kind of a resurrection of local food for schools and childcare. And then also we noticed in the finer details that they've requested a reduced USDA farm to school staff from 28 to 20. So, and we've also seen that there's proposed cuts and eliminations for farm to ECE and other really important programs. At CDC, the National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion was zeroed out in the president's budget, and that if that were to be eliminated, it would have real effects on a lot of programs associated with farm to school activity, especially with the Association of State Public Health Nutritionists. And then the same goes for the Institute of Child Nutrition, which is it's one of the only federally funded national centers dedicated to applied research, education, training, and technical assistance for child nutrition programs. I know when I was first at NFSN, one of my first presentations was with the ICN, and they do a lot to uplift farm to school and training. So a couple questions. We didn't get farm to school grants this year. So what happens to the $10 million that's still allocated but was never awarded? And then we see in 2026, the House is wanting to bring us back up to the $10 million level. So does that mean we'll have $20 million to play with? We don't know. But the USDA has signaled that they are looking to release a new RFA for fiscal year 2026. And then finally, just again, it has to be asked: is LFSCC really done for? I think it's a good question, and it's one we should continue to ask, and one that we should continue to push that we want this reinstated. So let's talk about this. We have an excellent panel here with us today, and I'll just kind of go one by one and introduce them. Cynthia Green is here with us from Vermont. She is Vermont's Farm to Early Childhood Partnerships Coordinator through Shelburne Farms Institute for Sustainable Schools. She coordinates the Vermont Farm to Early Childhood Coalition. She offers professional learning, coaching, and technical assistance to the early childhood field and works on state and national policy to bring farm fresh, nourishing food to children. So we're really excited to have Cynthia here with us. And Emma is a farmer. She's a co-owner and operator of Buffalo Ridge Orchard, an 80-acre diversified farm located in Central City, Iowa. And her farm produces vegetables, pears, apples, and value-added products. And Emma is committed to growing the local food economy and markets for farms products locally through an on-farm store, farmers market, CSA direct wholesale, to schools and local food hubs. And also we have Ponce Flores. He's a farmer, chef, and the sole operator of Masewaki Farms, no-till, no fossil fuel cultivation farm in Lawrence, Kansas. And he grows seasonal produce for restaurants and farmers markets and hopes to do so soon for culturally specific grocery stores. He also serves as a farm to school coordinator for the Lawrence Public Schools in Lawrence, Kansas. And then finally, Spencer Moss is coming to us from West Virginia. She brings a deep rooted passion for agriculture and a commitment to enhancing food, nutrition access, and farm viability. And since joining the West Virginia Food and Farm Coalition in 2015, Spencer has dedicated her efforts to supporting individuals who aspire to nourish their communities and sustain farms as a viable livelihood. So she's collaborated with nonprofits, extension services, universities, political candidates to visually and effectively communicate these stories of community, trust, and change. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and hello, y'all. Thank y'all so much for being with us. Um, yeah, I think everyone is excited to kind of like and interested and curious to learn a little bit more, just kind of like where y'all are now within this context. And so, Ponta, I want to kind of kick it to you first. You're both a farmer and a coordinator in Farm to School. And so you have those your feet in both doors. Plus, I learned that your program has been around for a while, the one at the Lawrence Public Schools. So maybe just share a little bit on how it's taken shape now and how that growth over time, including the growth with farm to school grants and LFS, has impacted y'all.
Yeah, so we have been around for about 12 years, started small and have expanded across the whole district. We're about 10,000 learners, just to give you framework there. We're at a 38% free and reduced rate. And we have 21 different buildings from ECE through adult learners as well. And so gardens at every single site. Of course, that also didn't happen overnight. We've been building for years and years. I've been in this position for 3 years, so I've seen a decent amount of it from kind of the behind the scenes look. So I work very, very closely with our school food authority, so our kitchen staff and admin. Um, and yeah, I've been very lucky to be able to see kind of both sides of it. Having run a farm by myself for about 3 years before coming into this position. For us, we've been just financially very, very careful about whenever we're receiving grant money. We kind of take the position that this could go away, and like it's been a very beneficial way to approach it, knowing that it could possibly not be funded again, even in the next year with whoever comes into office. And so I think that has really helped us stay on our feet. And when I say, we talk about that with our farmers as well. And so when we go in and we say that there's this market here with this funding, we make sure that they also understand, like, this may be just a really great year-long ability for us to purchase. And have a very open, upfront conversation with them. And so for us, will it impact us? Absolutely. We have $140,000 of school meal debt right now. But is it outside of our calculation to not have it? Also not. So we're feeling like being treading very lightly when it comes to things that are grant funded or that are required by the legislature to pass to fund. That we're open with our farmers about that funding, and that we're honest with ourselves about what our capacities are and how we move forward for when times like this arise. So definitely impacted for us. Our farmers, again, we talk to them regularly, and that's something I definitely suggest folks do. We tend to over communicate, which doesn't seem to get on anybody's nerves so far. So far, so good with that. And so, we are still planning on procuring lots of local food because we've worked that in slowly over time and kind of increased the amount that we buy. We're at about 16% of the school meals for the year, is procured locally. So we're buying about $350,000 worth of produce locally. And that, again, scaled slowly over time. So slow growth as we've grown our relationships slowly and organically with our farmers. And that has really led to a good amount of stability.
Thanks, Ponta. And Emma, yeah, I'm kind of curious to learn a little bit more about your growth in farm to school and how that's affected you positively, and how maybe like these terminations and cuts have impacted y'all?
Yeah, so we have always worked with schools since we farmed, and it's been a great relationship. So looking at your graph, I think we must have fallen into that 2010 period where we have some core schools that work with us, and it's been really great. And they've kind of grown, we've grown up with them. So they've procured more apples, primarily apples and pears, as they kind of got used to the idea of purchasing local. But the local food for schools really just, I want to say, just added so much more money. So with that money in Iowa, it meant that we could build a supply chain. We could actually send our apples and our produce to a much wider footprint than what we could do on our own. And so it enabled us to reach, close to all of Iowa with our produce, which was awesome. And it also meant the food hubs and the nonprofits that were involved in procuring the food were doing a lot of education for the schools that had to actually bring their kitchens back. They were used to, instead of chopping onions, they weren't chopping onions, they were getting pre-packed chopped onions. And so they had to bring back utensils. They had to suddenly use the food. So by having more of an infrastructure, they're now in a place where they can purchase locally. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is those early adopters that we worked with local food for schools, they're going to keep purchasing with us, which is great. We really appreciate that. Those schools that were participating because they suddenly had the funds, they're falling off to the side. So we're seeing almost 100% of schools that previously were working with us not being able to purchase. And then even those schools that had purchased with us before, their budgets are really shrinking too. So their purchasing is going to be down by 30%. Now we're primarily an apple orchard and pear orchard, and it's not apple season yet. So we haven't, none of this has come to fruition. It's more of the conversations that we've had with our local food partners and our food hubs that would be distributing. But it's a big hit because what we're seeing is the food hubs are contracting, the supply chain that turned into a well-oiled machine in very few years. And in 2 years, it essentially became something everyone could rely on. So now, deliveries there isn't that. This light supply chain, things are moving slower. It's harder to get things farther out from where we can distribute them. So we have to really think hard about that. And it becomes harder to move produce in an efficient manner. And it's unfortunate because I think a lot of farms, a lot of young farmers, which I like to think of myself as young, but farmers who have been farming for less than 10 years, this program allowed them to start growing more of one thing. And that efficiency allowed them to actually make more money, because when you grow 100 different crops, it's really great, but it also, you can't do all 100 crops efficiently. So when you take that away, they're back to their profit margins are getting slimmer.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Spencer, I know we just heard a little bit from Emma and Ponta on their kind of experiences as farmers and farm school coordinators, and I'm just curious how what they're sharing maybe rings true for y'all in West Virginia. Like, how has this grown for y'all, and then how is this kind of these terminations and cuts and cancellations have impacted y'all?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I think first of all, the biggest thing is, so for about a decade in West Virginia, we've seen a huge push farm to school, farm to school, farm to school. And it's not something that's done easy, because there are certain hacking and timing elements, right, that farmers have to meet to get to this farm to school space, right? So this is something that's scaled up over time. And the other thing that's really challenging is sort of issue of trust, right? So I'm in West Virginia, we're a special place, but folks don't necessarily inherently trust institutions around here, right? And so um, we've had to build trust in the farm to school program, or really in any farm to institution program, over time. And so those LFS and LFPA funds really last year helped to really build trust, right? Farmers basically could an infinite amount of supply that they could provide. And so that built a lot of trust. And so we had farmers that scaled up for this year because they already had contracts with schools and food banks anticipating another round of LFPA and LFS. And those got ripped away from folks. And they had already bought the supplies, they had already scaled herds, they had already bought new cold containers. All of these things had already occurred. And so now they're left holding the bag, and they have lost trust in these institutions. They have lost trust in a process that ourselves and the Department of Agriculture have been working to build for a decade. So in addition to the funding aspect, there's a loss of trust. That being said, we know we did a study in 2018 with West Virginia University, and they looked at a bunch of stuff. One of the things that they looked at was motivations. Why do you farm? We know you're not going to get rich farming. And in fact, you're going to break your body doing it. So why are you even in this gig? And overwhelmingly, the response is that our farmers just wanted to feed their community. And so getting over some of those hurdles in farm to school, it was part of meeting those motivations. And so right now we're just dealing with a lot of hurt feelings and trying to figure out how to move a bunch of other produce that doesn't have a home right now.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely powerful about the motivations. I mean, it is so true. And I'm no doubt farmers across the country feel that way as well, wanting just to feed their community. Cynthia, you know, I'm just curious to kind of, we've heard a lot about like kind of like the K-12 space. I'm just curious to learn how this might apply to early care and education. LFS didn't even get a chance to see the light of day for childcare centers, but how is like this growth in ECE and farm to school, taking shape in Vermont, and how has it been affected by all these recent shifts?
Sure. Well, I would say, interestingly enough, you talked a little bit earlier about how a lot of these policies, cuts to SNAP, cuts to Medicaid, or cuts to school meals, there are also cuts in early childhood and the child adult care food program. So and you mentioned the Centers for Disease Control and their funding being zeroed out. And that is where a lot of support for farm to early childhood has come from. So the cuts impact early childhood in many, many ways, and it is already a challenged field, frankly, like from a business model. When Spencer was just talking about the farming business model, early childhood follows a similar model. So I would say, these cuts are incredibly damaging and impactful if they come to full fruition. I think on a bright side, I will say that Patrick Leahy is from Vermont. He was a senator. And so he helped raise this up, and Vermont has a long-standing history of supporting farm to school. And in 2018, we actually updated our state Farm to School Act to specifically include early childhood. There are several reasons behind that, but one of them is that, the caveat here is I'm actually an early childhood educator. In early childhood, we have the greatest potential to influence children's eating habits and their desires. And so if we want to raise healthy, nutritiously fed children who will select these types of foods in childcare and in homes and in schools, like, we can start early. And that was an impetus for Vermont to really focus on this. Just, I think, specifically to sort of scale this a little bit for what Vermont has been doing, and kind of talked about sort of the impact, but what we have been doing is we've also really focused on, I would say farm to early childhood has the benefit of looking at what farm to school has done and then building off of some of those systems or modifying them. So we aren't starting from scratch. So we jumped right into systems work. We have started and we built out, community supported agriculture grants specifically for ECEs to access food and get money to do that. We included them in our Know for Vermont farmers and producers searchable directory, so people can get directly connected to. And then we provide, Know for Vermont actually provides technical assistance to early educators and farmers to make those connections. We've really looked at right sizing, speaking to Emma's like new farming or trying out new crops. Like, we've tried to right size Early education programs typically purchase less. They're a great opportunity for farms to try a new smaller crop or a culturally relevant crop or a new crop that they just want to try out, but have a smaller sort of market for, if you will. So right sizing and farm flexibility. We've really looked at food access, and we've been building out food access can be a challenge for small early childhood programs in particular, especially if they're located in a low food access designated area. So we've been operating some pilots, that systems and distribution. Emma touched on that a little bit as well. And then I would say we've really focused on education and advocacy. So building our community. So to Panta's point earlier, when or if grant funding fluctuates, how do we activate this network to say, when you were talking about there are wins all across these sectors, how do we get folks from all of those sectors to really show up and say, this is important work? And we've activated an entire early childhood community in support of this work. So we've added more folks to that. So that's how we've really focused on farm to early childhood and kind of expanded on the work prior.
No, that's great. And it's so encouraging to kind of hear about how y'all are working as a network and working to like really find real ways to support small family farms in these kind of creative and innovative, flexible ways. We're going to have some time to take some questions. I want to make sure we have enough time for that. So, but I do want to touch on at least two overarching questions with some of y'all. I think we just kind of heard a little bit about how like Vermont is really wanting to like kind of support small family farms, but like shifting to the federal level, I shared about the Farmers First policy agenda and then the MAHA report and how they kind of like, say that they would like to support farm to school and small family farms. So Emma, I was just wanting to kind of jump to you real fast. I'm curious to kind of hear what you think about that, because it does seem like there's some cognitive dissonance, like funding is being terminated, cut and canceled, yet there's a priority to work on behalf of small family farms and basically local procurement through farm to school. So what are you seeing? What are you not?
I guess I just want to say I grew up on a farm, and I've grown up with it seems like every politician has to speak to saying, oh, and we want to support the farmers, we want to support the small farms. But the trajectory of in the 80s when I was growing up to where we are now, most farms are big corporate farms, and the policy has never supported what the politicians are saying out loud. So the LFPA and local food for schools and some of the crop insurance policy changes that had happened over the last 4 to 6 years, we're finally making some policy changes that actually supported small family farms. So I'm on an 80-acre farm. 80 acres is a drop in the bucket in Iowa. A small farm is considered 2,000 acres, and you're growing commodity crops. So we're kind of an odd place. When I was growing up, 80 acres was a small farm, but it was an average size farm in Iowa. And, through the 80s, it was like, get big or get out. And you shouldn't be part of farming if you can't purchase thousands and thousands of acres and get really big equipment. And instead, my parents went a different direction. They have an 80-acre farm, and they looked at different crops that they could grow so that they could have a place for not just themselves, but my husband and I both work full-time. My parents work here full-time, and we have 4 additional staff. So I just say to the new administration to actually look at the receipts, because when you support a small family farm, they actually bring jobs to rural America. They bring good paying jobs to rural America. And, it's our small little farms that are actually revitalizing places like Central City, Iowa. It's not those big corporate farms. And so they do need to put their money where their mouth is. They need to have it less of a talking point, and they need to actually support it, because 2 years of support with the LFS program was huge. It supported the rural schools, it supported the rural farmer, it supported people who lived in the rural areas that they could actually be employed. So it was a win-win-win. And so I really think that it feels like just talk unless they actually start supporting programs that were working, and LFS was working very, very well.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Ponta, anything to add?
I guess, having this being round 2 with this administration and seeing some of the other things that have happened, my hope in all of this is that they're burning and slashing something to do that whole part of it, but then they're putting up this other thing that says, hey, look, we did it, so that we can like maybe give them the little pat on the back when the time that they're still here in this administration, and they can say they did it. But I think a lot of it's posturing, and that's kind of just where my gut reaction lies. But my concern within the Farmers First part is that they're redefining small farms as one of their main points. And so where they go with that then shows us a whole lot about what is intended one way or 16 different ways or the other. And so that's the part that raises my concern, is like how they're going to redefine that, and why and where chips may fall if they decide that it's $100 or it's $1 million. Because then, that opens up a lot of potential for money to get slid, kind of the way it did when they did the box program during COVID. And that money slid in a whole bunch of real odd, very clear ways, if you look into it a little bit deeper. So I think that's all I've got to add on that.
Gotcha. Spencer, if you have a minute to add anything to that, I'd be curious to hear if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, actually, Panta said one of the notes that I had made is if we look, it's posturing, in my opinion, and I'm maybe a little critical and jaded. I'm in West Virginia, very close to DC, spending time on the Hill as of late. I think that the USDA took a lot of heat for slicing and dicing programs, and I think in a lot of ways maybe they're going to try to bring some back as being repackaged. But I think they did come under a lot of heat. And so, in my opinion, this is just, lip service trying to ward off more heat. So I just don't really trust it. And something that I've noticed in the House Reconciliation Bill, the Ag Committee, they put out a one pager on why they were slashing the programs that they were slashing. In the very bottom of the one pager, they said, we're going to slash all of these programs because there are orphaned programs in the Farm Bill that we can better support farmers with. But they didn't name any of the programs, which means that they didn't pay that much attention to it. So, in my opinion, it's complete and total posturing. And to Panta's point, if we want to bring back the food box programs, the food banks hated it. They were not super successful, and no small farmers, at least in our area, benefited.
Gotcha. Cynthia, maybe a short tack on to all of this.
I think it's been said, to be honest. I think the proof will be in the pudding. I think, I would love to see our administration truly balance small family farming with larger scale production, and that they develop food policy that has flexible policy and investment, frankly, right? And that supports regionality. So I think that what really happens is to be determined.
Thanks, Cynthia. And while we're on you, Cynthia, maybe go around in 30 seconds, real rapid fire. I would love to hear, some bright spots that you all are seeing, even in this situation.
I will just say community and passion. Like, it has been amazing to see people across this country turn up for this. In Vermont, our network has been activated, and it's translated into our state legislature actually carved out one-time funding of $500,000 to backfill some of our local food for schools and childcare funding. And that was just signed by the governor. We also have one-time funding for $150,000 for CACFP sponsorship. We have $500,000 for our farm to school and early childhood grants program. We fully funded our local food purchasing incentive at $500,000, and we maintain our universal school meals. All of this in this legislative session when we know all of this other stuff is coming down the pike. So I would just say these are bright spots. Farm to school and early childhood is multiple wins. And I think our country is starting to see that.
Thanks, Cynthia. And Spencer, I know you shared that West Virginia is a unique place, and it might not perhaps be, in the same position as a state like Vermont, but would have been some bright spots for y'all. out of this?
Man, I love it when a farmer gets fired up. And so it's been a lot of fun for us to drag farmers to the state capitol and drag farmers to DC. I don't mean drag, they come willingly. And we let them come in what we call farmer chic, bibs and a suit coat. But I think a really big bright spot for us is when we lost LFPA and LFS. We had a whole bunch of farmers show up to our state capitol during our lobby day, and we managed to get a joint concurrent resolution through our super duper ultra conservative in both chambers a resolution that asked each member of our U.S. congressional delegation to ask the USDA to reinstate these programs. And we also got a letter from our state Senate president. It's kind of a big deal to get that engagement. So I loved Fire Up Farmers, and I love that our state legislators are paying attention.
That's fantastic. Emma, feel free to share any good news you have.
Well, I always say farming, food farming is a team sport here in Iowa because it always feels like we're a little different than everyone else in Iowa that's farming. And it certainly turns out that way. So we have a lot of farmers teaming up, trying to move each other's produce. So we opened our farm store several months early so that we can be a place where we can move other farmers. Our peak season is honestly apple season, but we can move more farmers' produce through our farm store and have more hours. A lot of farmers are doing add-ons to their CSA to include our apples. And although it is a lot more work to have to individually bag apples, we're still going to see substantial losses to our business. It seems like we're working to build a supply chain that is going to continue to be resilient. And we're also tag teaming on deliveries. We're having to take part in getting some of the distribution done with some of the attractions of the supply chain. And so the farmers are working together to figure that out. So I think it's still a team sport in Iowa farming and local food farming, and we're going to keep working together and we're going to keep building. And I think that's really important. And we also have a lot of customers who are just, they've seen a lot of press. I think the press and keeping it in the news has really helped because I think our community wants to support farms. They want to support their local community. So we're seeing they're showing up. We're having record farmers market sales. It's been really good from that standpoint. Yeah.
That's really great to hear, and that's encouraging. And also I'm thinking of kind of like encouragement and resilience. I know Panta, when we checked in a couple of days ago, I think you have a unique perspective to be able to kind of offer other folks who, y'all are able to grow your program over time, and other folks have the opportunity to do that too. So, it was great to have this short burst of funds, but for new folks, and it got a lot of new people into the farm to school game. But yeah, we'd just love to hear your kind of closing thoughts.
Yeah, so for us, our win was I helped get $6 million unfrozen before it went through review. So we spent $100,000 to build a school district run bakery out of one of our closed elementary schools. We're in a bit of a population decline right now. And spent the money literally a week later during spring break, we get the notification that the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Grant was frozen. So that's $100 million not in our school pockets anymore. And so luckily it was spring break and I had no buildings to go put fires out in. And so I just did a bunch of legal research, let all of our administrators know, hey, we have 30 days to appeal any adverse decision by USDA. We were subawardees from the State Department of Agriculture. So we didn't have a direct appeal, but we did have voices still, right? And so I went in and did research to try to figure out how to exhaust all administrative remedies, another phrase that I learned, so that we would still have federal standing in court should it come to that. Then crafted a letter that was polite to our Kansas Department of Agriculture because we trust them and we know them, and still made it have enough legal teeth to know that we were serious. And after that point, I contacted everybody on that list who got that grant and said, hey, here's a template, do with it what you will. And then, KDA got a lot of letters out of that, including one from the school district and some other farmers that I know personally, and I'm sure some others on top of that. And then use that kind of pressure to put it to USDA to AMS and say, these people have a lot of legal language in these letters. And then so, a few weeks later, unfrozen. And then I think just last week it was officially through review, but it got unfrozen before it was through review because of that pressure and that organizing. I think the other kind of last thing I'd like to leave folks with is they can take our funding, but they can't take our relationships. They can take our money that they already even allocated, but they can't take that phone away from me that is a few numbers away from calling the farmers that I know and checking in on them. So check in on your farmers, even if you've bought from them once, like see how they are, communicate with them. You're the only one who can take away that relationship. Nobody in any kind of funding stream can. And even if it's just a conversation to check in and see how they're doing, and not one where you're calling with an order, I think it'll help, because we need checked in on quite a bit more than I think we get checked in on as farmers.
Well, thank you all so much. And I know we're running close to time, but I think it was really important to hear everything you all had to share. Maybe we have time for one question if we go over a couple minutes. Maybe we go over a couple minutes, but yeah, anybody have a pressing question for our panel today? Feel free to put it in the chat or come off mute. Well, our panel must have done a really great job and answered everybody's questions. But seriously, if you have any questions or you want to follow up, you feel free to reach out to us at National Farm to School Network. We'd be happy to continue this conversation. Thanks again, Cynthia, Emma, Spencer, Panta. Thanks again to Alonzo for interpretation, and thanks to y'all who took time out of your day to come to this conversation. Again, we'll be sharing the recording, we'll share the slides, and please share those slides with folks and share those conversations with folks. And there's numerous ways to be able to get involved and engaged. And also, we welcome everybody at this time to become an NFSM partner. If you're not already an organizational partner or a member, you can also become an individual member. The link is in the chat. And then we're really excited that our partner meeting is, on the 2025 Farm to Cafeteria Conference is coming up in December. So you can visit our website to learn more about that. It should be on one of the first images on the homepage. But again, thank you all so much, and have a great day. Oh yes, it is in New Mexico. So thanks for putting that in. Yes, I see you, Pam. We're really excited to come to y'all in December. So anyways, thank you all so much. Have a good one.